Hello everyone, welcome to Campfire Nights. I know you're here to fall asleep, so before that, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now, get comfortable and relax. I've always loved road trips. There's something about the open highway, the hum of tires on asphalt, and the way the world blurs past that feels like freedom. My best friend, Nate, and I had been planning this one for months. A cross-country drive from Chicago to Denver. Just the two of us, chasing the promise of mountains and open skies. We were both in our mid-20s, restless after a year of grinding at our dead-end jobs, and this trip was our escape. We had mapped out back roads to avoid the monotony of interstates, packed a cooler with snacks, and loaded a playlist of 90s rock to keep us going. The first day was perfect: sun-soaked fields, small-town gas stations, and the kind of dumb banter that only comes from years of friendship. But on the second night, somewhere in the middle of Nebraska, things took a turn I still can't fully explain. Even now, 2 years later, I get this sick twist in my gut just thinking about it. It was around 10 p.m., and we were on a 2-lane road cutting through endless cornfields. The moon was a thin sliver, barely lighting the landscape, and the stars were swallowed by a haze that made the night feel heavier than it should. Nate was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping along to Nirvana on the stereo. I was half dozing in the passenger seat, my head against the window, when I noticed headlights in the side mirror. They were distant at first, just a faint glow bobbing in the dark, but something about them caught my eye. They weren't fading or getting closer, they were just there, keeping pace. I sat up, blinking away sleep, and checked the mirror again. "Nate," I said, keeping my voice light, "you see that car back there?" He glanced in the rearview mirror, squinting. "Yeah, been there for a bit, I think. Probably just some farmer heading home." His tone was casual, but I caught the way his fingers tightened on the wheel. We'd been on this road for at least an hour, and I hadn't noticed any cars behind us until now. No turnoffs, no side roads, just us and the corn. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing. People drive at night. It's a highway. But the headlights stayed steady, maybe a quarter mile back, matching our speed exactly. "Let's test it," I said, half joking, but already feeling a prickle of unease. "Speed up a little." Nate raised an eyebrow but pressed the gas, pushing our old Honda from 60 to 70. The headlights didn't waver, they sped up too, closing the gap just enough to stay visible. "Okay, weird," Nate muttered, his voice losing its playful edge. He slowed to 50, then 45, dropping below the speed limit. The headlights slowed too, keeping that same precise distance. My stomach twisted. "Coincidence," I said, but it sounded hollow even to me. Nate didn't answer, just kept his eyes flicking between the road and the mirror. We drove like that for another 20 minutes, the silence between us growing heavier. The car stayed behind us, unyielding, its headlights like eyes that never blinked. I turned off the music, the sudden quiet making the hum of the engine feel too loud. "Maybe it's a cop," I said, grasping for something rational. "Undercover, tailing us to see if we're drunk or something." Nate snorted, but it wasn't a laugh. "Cops don't tail you for 20 miles without flashing lights. This is something else. He was right. It didn't feel like law enforcement. It felt deliberate. I pulled out my phone to check the map, hoping to find a gas station or town where we could pull over and shake this thing. No service. Of course. We were in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where cell towers are a myth. There's a turnoff in about 10 miles, I said, squinting at the cached map. Leads to some small town. We can pull in there, see what they do. Nate nodded, his jaw tight. If they follow us, we'll know it's not random. The next 10 miles felt like an eternity. The headlights never wavered, never got closer or farther, just hovered like a predator pacing its prey. My mind started spinning. Maybe they were waiting for us to stop, to run out of gas, to pull over. I checked the fuel gauge, half a tank. We were fine for now, but the thought of being stranded with that car behind us made my skin crawl. Nate's knuckles were white on the wheel, and I could tell he was fighting the same thoughts. "You think they're messing with us?" he asked, his voice low. Like some kind of road game. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to think anymore. When we finally reached the turnoff, a faded sign pointed to a town called Elwood, population 312. Nate didn't signal, just swerved onto the narrow road, the tires kicking up gravel. My heart was pounding as I watched the side mirror. For a moment, the headlights kept going straight, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "They're gone," I said, almost laughing with relief. But then, maybe 30 seconds later, the headlights reappeared, turning onto the road behind us. "Shit," Nate whispered, slamming his hand on the wheel. "They're following us." The road to Elwood was even darker, flanked by dense trees instead of corn, the branches forming a tunnel that swallowed what little moonlight there was. The car behind us was closer now, maybe 200 yards, its headlights brighter in the tighter space. I could make out the shape of it now, a dark sedan, maybe black or navy, impossible to tell in the dark. No license plate was visible, just a smooth, featureless front grille. What do they want? I muttered, more to myself than Nate. He didn't answer, just pushed the gas harder. The Honda rattling as we hit 80, the town came into view, a cluster of dim streetlights, a gas station, a few shuttered storefronts. It was dead quiet, the kind of place that rolls up at 6 p.m. Nate pulled into the gas station lot, the only place with any light, and parked under the brightest floodlight. "We're not moving," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "Let's see what they do." I nodded, my mouth dry, and we both stared at the mirror. The sedan slowed as it entered the town, then pulled into a side street across from the gas station, maybe 100 yards away. It stopped, engine idling, headlights still on, pointed right at us. We sat there, frozen, the hum of the gas station's neon sign buzzing above us. "What now?" I whispered. Nate's eyes were locked on the sedan. "We wait. They can't just sit there forever." But they did. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The sedan didn't move, didn't turn off its lights, didn't do anything, just watched. I tried my phone again, no bars. Nate checked his. Dead, even though it had been at 80% an hour ago. "This isn't right," he said, his voice barely above a breath. "Phones don't just die like that." I don't know how long we sat there, maybe 20 minutes, maybe longer. Time felt warped, like the air itself was pressing down on us. Then, without warning, the sedan's headlights flicked off. For a second, I thought they'd left. but the car was still there, a dark shape blending into the shadows. Then the driver's door opened. My heart stopped. A figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hooded jacket. They didn't move toward us, just stood there, staring. I could feel their eyes, even if I couldn't see them. "Nate," I said, my voice cracking. "We need to go. Now." He didn't argue. He threw the car into drive and peeled out of the lot, back toward the main road. The sedan's headlights flicked back on as we pulled away, and it followed, faster this time, closing the gap. We were flying now, the Honda shaking at 90, the trees blurring past. "Where are we going?" I yelled, gripping the door handle. "Anywhere but here," Nate shouted back. The sedan was right behind us now, maybe 50 feet, its headlights flooding our car with blinding light. I could hear its engine, a low growl that drowned out our own. Then, out of nowhere, Nate slammed on the brakes. I lurched forward, the seatbelt biting into my chest. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed. He didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, his face pale. The sedan stopped too, so close I could see the driver's silhouette, just a shape, no face, no details. For a moment, everything was still. Then the sedan's horn blared, a long, deafening wail that made my ears ring. It wasn't a normal horn. It was wrong, too deep, too loud, like something mechanical and alive at the same time. I clapped my hands over my ears, shouting for Nate to drive, but he was frozen, his eyes wide with something I'd never seen in him before, pure terror. The horn stopped, and the sedan's lights went out again. In the sudden darkness, I heard something else, a low, rhythmic tapping, like metal on glass. It was coming from our car, from the back window. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, just the empty road and the sedan's dark shape. "Nate, go," I screamed, and he snapped out of it, flooring the gas. The sedan didn't follow this time. I kept checking the mirror, waiting for those headlights to reappear, but they didn't. It was just us, speeding through the night, the tapping sound still echoing in my head. We didn't stop until we hit a bigger town an hour later, pulling into a 24-hour diner with shaking hands. We told the waitress, a kind, older woman, what happened, but she just gave us a pitying look, like we were drunk or crazy. The police took our statement, but there was nothing to go on, no plate, no clear description, just a story about a car that followed us for hours and vanished. Our phones worked again in the diner, but the timestamps were off, showing a gap of 2 hours we couldn't account for. Nate and I finished the trip, but we stuck to interstates after that, never talking about it again. I still drive sometimes, but I avoid back roads at night. Every time I check my rearview mirror, I half expect to see those headlights, steady and unblinking, waiting for me to make a mistake. I don't know who they were or what they wanted, but I know one thing. They weren't just messing with us. They were hunting. Road trips are supposed to be about freedom, right? The open road, greasy diner food, and the thrill of nowhere to be, but where you're going. That's what my girlfriend Lena and I were chasing when we set out from St. Louis to Santa Fe. A week-long escape from our soul-sucking office jobs. We were both 27, a little reckless, and obsessed with finding hidden gems, those off-the-grid spots you don't find on travel apps. planned to stick to back roads, crash in cheap motels, and soak up the weirdness of small-town America. It was all going great until we pulled into the Starlight Motel in rural Oklahoma. That night changed everything. Even now, a year later, I can't sleep in a room with a locked door without checking it twice. It was around 11 p.m. when we rolled into the motel's gravel lot, exhausted from a long day of driving through flat, dusty plains. The Starlight was a relic, a single-story L-shaped building with peeling paint, flickering neon sign, and maybe 10 rooms total. The kind of place you'd see in a B-movie horror flick and laugh at, but we were too tired to care. The office was lit by a single bulb, casting long shadows across a faded map of Oklahoma on the wall. The clerk, a wiry guy in his 50s with a stained flannel shirt, barely looked up from his crossword as he slid us a key for room 7. Cash only, he grunted, pointing to a handwritten sign. Lena handed over $40, and he gave us a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sleep tight," he said, and I swear his voice had an edge, like he was in on a joke we didn't get. Room 7 was what you'd expect. Musty carpet, a sagging double bed, and a TV that probably hadn't worked since the 90s. The air smelled like stale cigarettes and something sour I couldn't place. Lena dropped her bag and flopped onto the bed, joking about how we'd probably wake up with bedbugs. I laughed, but I was already feeling off. The room was too quiet, no hum of an AC, no distant highway noise, just a heavy stillness that made my ears ring. I checked the door's deadbolt twice before unpacking, a habit I picked up after too many true crime podcasts. "This place gives me the creeps," I said, trying to keep it light. Lena just rolled her eyes. "It's a motel, Jake. They're all creepy. Let's just crash." We ate some gas station snacks and scrolled through our phones, no service, naturally. But we had offline playlists to keep us sane. Around midnight, we turned off the lights and tried to sleep. That's when I heard it, a faint thump from below the floor. It was soft, like something heavy being dropped on carpet, but it made me sit up. Lena was already half asleep, her breathing slow. "You hear that?" I whispered. She mumbled something incoherent, so I let it go, chalking it up to the building settling. Old motels creak, right? But then it came again, thump, thump, pause, thump, like someone pacing in a room below us. Except there couldn't be a room below us. The motel was one story, built on a concrete slab. I'd seen the foundation when we pulled in. I lay there, heart picking up, telling myself it was pipes, or maybe an animal under the floorboards. But the thumps kept coming, steady and deliberate, now mixed with a faint scraping, like metal dragging on wood. I nudged Lena, who groaned but sat up when she saw my face. "What?" she whispered, annoyed. "Listen," I said, pointing at the floor. Her eyes narrowed, and then she heard it too, a low, rhythmic thump, followed by a muffled sound, almost like a voice, too faint to make out. "What the hell is that?" she said, her voice tight. I didn't have an answer. We got out of bed, both in socks, trying not to make a sound. I grabbed my flashlight from my bag, the one I kept for emergencies, and shone it on the floor. The carpet was worn but intact, no trapdoors or loose boards. The thumping stopped for a moment, and I thought maybe we'd imagined it. Then it started again, louder, closer, like it was right under our feet. Lena grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "There's something under there," she whispered, her eyes wide. I wanted to laugh it off, to say she was being paranoid, but my chest was tight, and every instinct screamed to get out. I crept to the door, checking the deadbolt again, then peered through the peephole. The parking lot was empty except for our car and a rusty pickup by the office. The neon sign flickered, casting an orange glow that made the shadows twist. Nothing moved, but the thumping kept going, now with a faint hum, like an old machine starting up. "We need to check this out," I said, my voice shaking. Lena shook her head. "Are you crazy? We're not going down there." "Down where?" I snapped, louder than I meant to. "There's no basement." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure anymore. We decided to go to the office. Maybe ask the clerk what was going on. I grabbed my pocket knife, not much, but better than nothing, and we slipped on our shoes. The thumping stopped as we opened the door, the sudden silence somehow worse. The night air was cold, the gravel crunching under our feet as we hurried to the office. The clerk was still there, hunched over his crossword, but he didn't look surprised to see us. "Problem?" he asked, his voice flat. I explained the noises, trying to sound calm, but my words came out rushed. "Sounds like something S under our room, like in a basement or something." He raised an eyebrow, setting down his pencil. "No basement here, just pipes. Old place, you know, makes all kinds of noises." His eyes flicked to Lena, then back to me, and I got that same uneasy feeling from earlier, like he was hiding something. Lena wasn't buying it. "Pipes don't sound like footsteps," she said, her voice sharp. The clerk shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "You're welcome to check around. Nothing to see." He handed us a flashlight from under the counter, a heavy old thing that felt more like a club. I took it, not sure why, and we stepped back outside. The thumping had started again, faint but unmistakable, coming from the direction of our room. Lena grabbed my hand. "Jake, let's just leave. Get in the car and go." I wanted to agree, but something in me, stupidity, maybe needed to know what was going on. We circled the motel, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The building's foundation looked solid, no vents or access points. But as we passed room 7, the thumping got louder, and now there was a new sound, a low, guttural murmur, like someone talking through a wall. I froze, shining the light on the ground. That's when I saw it, a metal grate, half hidden under a pile of leaves, tucked against the wall near our room. It was rusted, padlocked, but the size of a manhole cover. Lena's breath caught. "That's not pipes," she whispered. I knelt down, my hands shaking, and pressed my ear to the grate. The murmur was clearer now, words maybe, but in a language I didn't recognize, mixed with a rhythmic scraping, like tools being sharpened. I stood up, my heart hammering. "We're leaving," I said, but before we could move, the office door creaked open behind us. The clerk was there, silhouetted against the light, holding something in his hand, a crowbar maybe, or a pipe. "You folks shouldn't be poking around," he said, his voice low. No trace of the bored clerk from before. Lena tugged my arm, and we bolted for the car, the gravel slipping under our feet. The thumping under the motel got louder, faster, like it was reacting to us. I fumbled with the keys, dropping them once before getting the door open. was already in the passenger seat, her face pale. "Go, go, go," she screamed. I peeled out of the lot, the tires spitting gravel, and didn't look back until we were on the highway. The motel's neon sign faded in the rearview mirror, but I swear I saw the clerk standing in the lot, watching us go. The thumping sound stayed in my head like it was burned into my brain. We drove until dawn, stopping at a truck stop 100 miles away. My phone had service again, and I looked up the Starlight Motel. Nothing came up, no website, no reviews, just a single mention on an old forum about weird noises and a missing couple who'd stayed there years ago. I showed it to Lena, and she went quiet, her hands trembling as she clutched her coffee. We reported it to the police at the truck stop, but they brushed it off. Small-town cops, no evidence, just two freaked-out city kids. They said they'd check it out, but their eyes told me they wouldn't. Lena and I finished our trip, but we didn't talk about the motel again. We don't talk about much anymore, actually. Something about that night broke the ease between us. I still dream about that grate, about what was down there, people, machines, something worse. I don't know, but I do know this. We weren't alone in that motel. Something was watching, waiting, and I'm not sure we got away as clean as we think. Road trips are all about the little stops, aren't they? The quirky places you stumble into, where the coffee's too strong, and the locals give you stories to laugh about later. That's what I was thinking when my brother Ryan and I pulled into the Sunrise Diner off a lonely stretch of highway in northern Nevada. We were on a 2-week road trip from Seattle to Austin, just the two of us, 24 and 26, trying to outrun the monotony of our lives. Me a barista, him a warehouse worker. We'd been trading off driving, blasting punk rock, and hunting for weird roadside spots to make the miles feel less endless. The diner looked like a time capsule, chrome trim, a neon sign buzzing, open 24 hours, and a gravel lot with just a couple of rigs parked out front. It was 1 a.m., our stomachs were growling, and we figured we'd grab some burgers and keep moving. But that stop turned into something else, something I can't shake, even 6 months later. I don't trust diners anymore, not the ones off the beaten path. The place was quiet when we walked in, the kind of quiet that makes your footsteps sound too loud. The air smelled of fried onions and something faintly metallic, like old grease gone bad. A row of red vinyl booths lined the windows, most empty, except for a trucker hunched over a coffee at the far end. The counter had a few stools, a glass case with sad-looking pies, and a jukebox in the corner that wasn't playing. Behind the counter was a waitress, maybe 40, with a tight ponytail and a name tag that read Darling. She gave us a smile that was all teeth, no warmth, and said, "Sit anywhere, boys." Her voice had a rasp, like she'd smoked a pack already that night. Ryan nudged me, grinning. "This place is straight out of a David Lynch movie," he whispered. I laughed, but something about Darling's stare made my skin prickle. We slid into a booth near the door, the vinyl creaking under us. The menus were sticky, the kind you don't want to touch too long, with faded photos of pancakes and meatloaf. Darling came over, pen poised over her notepad, and we ordered quick cheeseburgers, fries, Cokes. She scribbled it down, her eyes flicking between us like she was sizing us up. "Passing through?" she asked, lingering a beat too long. "Yeah, heading to Austin," Ryan said, always the chatty one. "Just needed a pit stop." She nodded, her smile tightening. "Folks don't stop here much anymore. You're lucky we're open." The way she said lucky felt wrong, like she didn't mean it. I caught Ryan's eye, but he just shrugged, already scrolling his phone. No service, of course. Mine was dead too. While we waited, I glanced around. The diner felt off in ways I couldn't pin down. The fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a sickly yellow glow that made everything look washed out. The trucker at the counter hadn't moved, his coffee untouched, his head bowed like he was asleep. The windows showed nothing but our reflections and the black void of the desert beyond. I nudged Ryan. "This place give you the creeps," he smirked. "Dude, it's a diner, relax. You've been reading too many Reddit horror stories." But I noticed he kept glancing at the door, like he was checking our exit. Our food came fast, too fast, like it was already waiting. The burgers were greasy, the fries limp, but we were starving, so we dug in. Darlene hovered nearby, wiping the counter, but watching us. I tried to ignore her, but then I heard it. A faint clatter from the kitchen, like metal hitting the floor. It was quick, gone in a second, but Darlene's head snapped toward the sound, her smile faltering. "Everything okay back there?" I called, half joking. She recovered fast, her grin back in place. Just the cook, clumsy tonight. But her eyes darted to a door behind the counter, marked employees only, and I swear I saw her grip the rag tighter. Clatter came again, louder, followed by a low thump, like something heavy being dragged. Ryan stopped chewing, his burger halfway to his mouth. "What was that?" he said, loud enough for Darlene to hear. She didn't answer, just kept wiping the same spot on the counter, her movements jerky. The trucker still hadn't moved, and I started wondering if he was even breathing. The air felt thicker now, the metallic smell stronger. I leaned toward Ryan, keeping my voice low. "Something's not right here. We should go." He nodded, his usual cockiness gone. "Yeah, let's pay and bounce." I waved Darlene over, pulling out my wallet. "Can we get the check?" She sauntered up, taking her time, and slid a handwritten bill onto the table, $22.50, scrawled in red ink. I handed her a 20 and a 5, saying, "Keep the change." But she didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the money like it offended her. "You boys sure you don't want coffee? On the house?" Her voice was too sweet, like she was trying to keep us there. Ryan shook his head. "Nah, we're good. Long drive ahead." She nodded slowly, then turned back to the counter. But I caught her glancing at that employee's only door again. We were halfway to the door when the clatter came back, louder, like a stack of pots crashing. This time, it was followed by a muffled sound, a groan maybe, or a word I couldn't make out. Ryan froze, his hand on the door handle. "Dude, that's not a cook," he whispered. I looked back. Darlene was gone. The counter was empty, the kitchen door slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling out. The trucker still hadn't moved. My heart was pounding now, every instinct screaming to run. But then the jukebox kicked on, blaring some old country song, the volume so loud it made my ears hurt. No one had touched it. "Let's go," I said, shoving Ryan toward the door. We stumbled into the lot, the gravel crunching under our boots, the cold air hitting us like a slap. Our car was right where we'd left it, but as I fumbled for the keys, I noticed something. The rigs in the lot were gone. Just our car and an old sedan parked near the dumpster, its windows tinted black. I hadn't seen it when we pulled in. Ryan grabbed my arm. "Jake, look." He pointed at the diner's windows. Darlene was there, standing behind the glass, watching us. She wasn't smiling anymore. And behind her, in the kitchen doorway, was another figure, tall, shadowy, holding something that glinted under the lights. We jumped in the car, my hands shaking as I started the engine. The jukebox was still blaring, the sound carrying into the lot. I peeled out, the tires spinning before catching, and we tore onto the highway. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting headlights to appear, but the road stayed dark. Ryan was quiet, his hands gripping his knees. "What the hell was that?" he finally said, his voice shaking. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was stuck on that groan, that glint, Darlene's stare. We drove for an hour before stopping at a gas station to catch our breath. My phone had a bar of service, and I Googled the Sunrise Diner. What I found made my blood run cold. A local news article from 3 years ago mentioned a string of disappearances along that highway, travelers, mostly, last seen at a diner matching the Sunrise's description. No arrests, no leads, just a note that the place had closed after the reports. But we'd just been there. I showed Ryan, and he went pale, scrolling through the article. "There's no way," he muttered, but his eyes said he believed it. We called the state police from the gas station, telling them everything, the noises, Darlene, the figure in the kitchen. They took our statement over the phone, sounding skeptical, and said they'd send a patrol to check. Days later, I called to follow up. The officer said they'd found no diner at that mile marker, just an empty lot with some old concrete slabs. No sign, no building, nothing. I argued, gave them the exact location, but he cut me off. "Happens sometimes out there," he said. "Desert plays tricks." I didn't push it. I knew what we'd seen. Ryan and I made it to Austin, but the trip wasn't the same after that. We don't talk about the diner, not really, though I catch him staring at nothing sometimes, like he's back in that booth. I looked up more about those disappearances later. The article mentioned personal items found in the desert, wallets, keys, a shoe, but no bodies. I keep my car keys on me now, even at home, and I check the locks before bed. I don't know what was in that kitchen, or why Darlene wanted us to stay, but I know one thing. That diner wasn't just a diner. It was waiting for us, and I'm not sure we're as free of it as we think.